So we've got an interesting video here, a video that I didn't think I'd play, especially considering the subject matter, spoken about. So obviously, I've covered the whole cancellation of Chris D'Elia and Brian Callen within the LA comedy scene. They've both been accused of varying levels of debauchery. I guess in Chris D'Elia's case, he's probably less severe charges of maybe, creeping into DMs of, girls who seemed like they were underage but weren't, and some that were, blah, 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 back and forth, who knows. And also, having a partner at home with a newborn baby probably wasn't a good look. So, and of course, when you take into account his image of being like a happy-go-lucky, funny dude, it didn't really marry up well that you were kind of, this guy behind closed doors or away from the glaring lights whilst he was on tour, was sliding into various teenagers' DMs. But hey, it's a cold, dark world. People get lonely and they want a bit of comfort, and I guess it is what it is, each to their own. But for the most part, most of his LA comedian friends have kind of abandoned him, some rightly or wrongly. Some of his closer friends like Whitney Cummings, Brian Callen, Brendan Schaub, Joe Rogan, some of these kind of, other stand-up LA comedy store people have kind of gone out their way to not mention him and kind of pretend that he never existed. Of course, Bert Kreischer, I mentioned previously, it's been alleged that he quite possibly had deleted or reshot an episode of The Cabin that featured Chris D'Elia in it, and everyone's kind of gone their way to distance him, which has been really interesting to observe from the outside in, and kind of shocking considering how popular he was with some of these people in the podcasting space, right? He contributed to many and many thousands and if not millions of views to their podcast, allowed them to reach a bigger audience, was a great podcast guest, created viral clips that are still resonate with fans, that live in that podcasting community, and just was generally kind of, from the outside in, looked like a bit of a good friend to these people. But when he kind of, was in a bit of trouble, and of course he was being cancelled, some say rightly, some say wrongly, it felt like they all sort of like went out their way to abandon him and distance themselves from him, self-preservation and all that malarkey. And some of the people that came out and fought his corner have been surprising though, and this is another one. Trisha Paytas recently, on the recent episode of Frenemies, a podcast she does with Heath and Klein of H3H3, she sits down and essentially grills Ethan, I guess, towards the end of the podcast, because I guess he's in a bad mood, and kind of asks him why, and they somehow get to speaking about Chris D'Elia. Really, really strange. You would never assume Trisha Paytas even knew who Chris D'Elia was, let alone going to speak about him to Ethan Klein. But she basically brought up the idea that, hey, he was your friend. Have you spoken to him? What's going on? I'd love to speak to him. But let's hear what Trisha Paytas has to say about the issue.
You love this still? You still love it? You still love doing the H3 podcast?
I do. I like it a lot. I like it more than I ever did.
Okay, my thoughts on the one today is you looked just over it. Like you didn't want to be alone on it. Like you were alone on the podcast today interviewing somebody, and you just were like, hey guys, welcome back to the H3 podcast.
You talking about ContraPoints? The last one?
The one today, yeah.
People thought it was really good. People thought it was
okay,
great.
maybe, but you looked miserable.
Well, I will say, first of all, I disagree. I thought that was a great interview, and I really like her. I think she's awesome. That being said, I do have a hard time with interviews. I find them to be very challenging. So I much prefer the collaborative ones, like with you and with the guys. That, to me, is more fun and less stressful. Anything else? Next.
I love interviews. Like, I think I thrive at interviews. I wish I could maybe I could host the H3 podcast.
Imagine listening to this person speak on an everyday basis on YouTube. I know she's very popular and people seem to like her, but YouTube is, courses for courses. Everyone's got their person that they like and stuff, and there's someone for everybody out there. But God almighty, man, what an interesting voice. It's like she's speaking on fast forward. You have that little feature on your YouTube where you can sort of like speed up. What's it called? It's on here, right? The playback speed. That's it. She's got a playback speed on ×2. But she's also very oddly clear in what she says. So it's really quick, but it's really clear. It's really interesting.
Cast by myself.
God, I mean, sure. Who do you want to interview?
Chris D'Elia.
Done.
Where is he? In hiding. Really? Use that Twitter Connect. DM him. You know him.
I have his phone number, but I feel bad messaging. I don't know. He's on his own thing. He's having a hard time for sure.
What do you do? Here's a good question. Okay, what do you do when? Okay, like literally, like okay, we'll use Ela because she's unproblematic. Don't get mad at me, Ela. But like, what if she got in like this crazy scandal, right? Like if she was at a party just saying the N-word, no COVID mask, like all this. You know what I mean? I know it's not gonna happen, but like she messes up big time, right? Or Chris D'Elia, for instance. Okay, let's say she was flirting with 17-year-old Hila or something. You know what I mean?
Jesus.
Okay. I mean, he's you. What if you're flirting with a 17-year-old?
Why? That's 3 examples so far. Just to get one point across, this girl is absolutely insane.
Me.
Okay. Dan, what if
Yeah,
you're
Dan,
flirting with a
flirting
17-year-old?
with 17-year-olds.
Okay. But okay, you love this person, right? Like, when someone gets in so much deep shit, how do you defend them? Do you not defend them? Do you have to denounce them?
Look, you don't. I think if it was someone that was very close to me, let's say like my best friend was caught like flirting with a 17-year-old or something,
Right.
or fucking a 17-year-ld.
Like Chris D'Elia was just
What do we
talking allegedly.
Well, he was
sexting
fucking
them?
really young fans.
Okay.
Of age.
Right.
You would, I would definitely denounce the behavior.
First issue. Can we have a grown-up conversation about, especially men of influence and, status and their preference for younger girls? Isn't that just a thing in general in Hollywood? Aren't most, production company executives, big Hollywood stars, TV stars, music stars for the most part, with women that are far younger than them to a certain degree? Maybe not in their teens, but definitely, more than 5-10 years younger than them. That's just a thing that happens. Now, is it gross? Is it weird? Is it odd? Yes. But is it illegal? No. If they're of age, it doesn't really matter to that extent. I guess that's where Chris really fucked up in that regard, because there's that one episode or one scenario of person where I think he hit up a girl that was allegedly 17. She said she's underage. He said, "Oh, my bad," stepped away, and then as soon as she turned 18, he kind of slipped back into the DMs. Now I think that story is the one that he argues that she purposely deleted the messages and made it look like he hit her back up, but the actual thing, if you look at it, is that what he alleges, or his camp alleges, is that girl that was 17 then hit him up when she turned 18 and said, "Hey, I'm DTF," basically, and then they really kind of connected. Now, should he be an adult in a situation and maybe be a little bit more mature and a bit more careful who he talks to? Probably, yeah. But when you're horny, I'm assuming, innit? Especially when you got access and you've got money and time and stuff, you just want to get what you want to get. So that's odd that you have to denounce people for being attracted to young girls. Like, younger girls or younger women. It's a bit odd they have to denounce that, really. I don't know.
But as a friend, you see a lot of redeeming qualities, and you want them to get better, and you want them to be well. So, like, obviously, that's the nature of it, right? It's like you denounce the behavior, but you encourage the person to grow and be better, and you stand by them.
Right.
He didn't do much of that, to be honest, when it comes to Chris D'Elia, but I don't blame him too, because I don't think Ethan is. Again, it's hard for Ethan to answer this question because he's not one of Chris D'Elia's closest friends. They obviously built up a bit of a relationship and a friendship over time. He was, he had a couple of good appearances on the H3 podcast. They seem to have a bit of a connection, the three of them, Ethan and Hila. When I used to watch, I don't really watch their podcasts anymore, but at the time, you saw a little bit of kinship developing there, especially, considering they're all LA-based entertainers and content creators. So it's hard for him to be put in that position. I think if anyone who should be grilled on this, it's the Whitney Cummings, it's the Brian Callens, the Brendan Schaubs, the Joe Rogans, whoever else is in the LA comedy scene. They should be grilled more. The Bobby Lees, right? They should be probably held more to account for, like, essentially abandoning their friend at their moment of need. Who cares about what he done, really? Let's be honest. If that's your friend, really, like day to day, like, let's just be honest. Wouldn't you go out your way, especially if you know they haven't done anything really gross and like legitimately gone after, prepubescent teenagers and stuff in a really pedophilic way? They're just attracted to younger girls and they're a bit reckless, especially if they got a partner at home who you'd admonish them, right? You'd pull them to the side and say, "Hey, that's not cool." You tell them off, but you'd be there for your friend, wouldn't you? I'd assume you would. But I guess if you're in Hollywood, you got your agents and you got your managers on breathing down your neck and stuff, it changes it. But I think it's a bit unfair for Ethan to be put in this position because, again, I don't think he's a close friend, but it's interesting his perspective.
So interesting.
I would stand by my friend.
Because so many people denounced Chris D'Elia.
Well, yeah.
Brian Callen, Whitney Cummings, like people that were like
that.
hardcore.
That to me is like I'm friendly with Chris, but if I was really close with Chris, I don't think if I was like that level of closeness, I would probably. What I would say is,
But it's hard too because Ethan doesn't really strike me as the most principled, friendly guy. Because didn't he throw PewDiePie under the bus when he got involved in that N-word gate saga when he inadvertently, accidentally slipped out the N-word in frustration when he was playing a game. He denounced him pretty quickly, even though they were friends, innit? That was really odd. So it's hard to ask him because these people are like, they're very concerned about their career, admittedly so, which they should be. I don't think it's bad. I think people on the outside need to be a little bit forgiving, right? To be a successful content creator of any sort of notoriety requires years and years and hours of dedicated work, and it's still not guaranteed that you're going to be successful. So to finally get there, the last thing you want is to be cancelled or for your career to get taken away from you from the actions of somebody that you don't even know, or you know loosely, or the actions of somebody else and not yourself. You don't want that in any way, shape or form. So there's going to be a little bit of a risk aversion to kind of getting your career cancelled, which makes sense, especially if you've got a family, or even if you're on your own. It doesn't matter. You just don't want to lose the status that you've kind of built up for yourself over a period of time. So I definitely get it, but it's hard to ask him because, again, like I said, I don't think he's the most principled man when it comes to these sort of things.
Obviously, we talked about it a lot. I mean, what he did was really gross, but as a person, you know, as a person, Chris was lovely. He was a super nice dude,
Right?
super sweet. You know, when Theodore was born, he sent us like a really thoughtful baby gift that not a lot of people did that were that thoughtful.
But he just abandoned his podcast, like just left. Like what happened? Like, you know?
Matt, dude, he was in like a huge blockbuster film and they like fucking cut his ass out. Like he's just probably in a really shitty spot.
Like I think that's the most
and like
disgusting
he's
thing.
engaged and he's having a baby at the same time, so
Right.
it's a lot.
No, I like my stance always is like older guys with younger girls. I think you're like the scum of the earth because that's how I got so fucked up. I think it's like the grossest thing you could do. But at the same time, it's like, wow, like it's crazy how people just turn. And I saw that with people in my own life too that had like scandal, like how many people just like unfollowing him, like you're disgusting. Meanwhile,
Well, there's a difference between like you know, Trisha made an insensitive TikTok and like here's evidence of behavior over years of him taking advantage of young girls.
I want to interview Crystal. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it might have been actually an interesting one because she is like the most uncancelable YouTube personality that exists, right? Whatever scandal, you know, self-inflicted or mistakenly that she gets herself involved in, she always seems to recover. Probably it's different when you're YouTube famous. I think you can just ride it out. I think there's a lot of deplorable, questionable human beings that exist on Facebook who probably don't come across as the best of people, but they seem to survive because their fan base just are in love with them. So that probably does help. But it's harder when you're a comedian. It's harder when you're a public figure. It's harder when you're a comedian working within the Hollywood entertainment infrastructure. You know, he was obviously making efforts to be a Hollywood star. He was obviously going to be in this action movie that Tig Notaro has replaced him in. He's trying to work in that industry, and you know, the Me Too thing. There's just so many elements at play that are going to sort of that are basically in charge of dictating whether or not you're a success or not, or whether or not you're allowed to have a career. That it's very difficult to sort of bounce back from these big scandals. Now, I've always said, I think another issue that Chris had is that he had this kind of, you know, squeaky clean image. So to suddenly be accused of that crazy shit really didn't help him. I think if you're Louis C.K., you can kind of bounce back a bit easier because you're known, you know, you tell us in your stand-up, you know, you tell us in interviews that you're a creep, that you're a bit of a sexual deviant, you know, that you've got these dark thoughts. So we are used to hearing these kind of questionable, crazy things about your psyche and about your actions in general. So when you hear a story about you allegedly, you know, whacking off into a plant pot, it's not that big of a disconnect from who you present yourself to be. But then on Crystalia's side, he has such bad timing in that he was, you know, portraying a pedophile on the show You. Then he gets accused of doing the same thing he's portrayed about, and then a slew of girls come out who are all younger looking, but of course mostly legal. It just doesn't look good optics wise, isn't it? And the fact that none of his friends came up and stood up for him as well doesn't help, because you'd imagine in some of these cases it does help when some of your friends say, hey, he's my friend, I'm going to stand by him. None of them did. So that made other people think, hey, maybe he is a bad guy because no one's kind of coming to bat for him. But I don't know, judging from what I've seen online, people seem to like him. I just think people just didn't want to touch him because it's a radioactive topic, isn't it? No one wants to be associated with somebody that touches up little kids or younger girls in any way, shape, or form, which is definitely understandable. But interesting perspective from Trisha Paytas. Again, interested to hear if this does kind of trickle through into, you know, Crystalia's space, if he does kind of stumble across it, and whether or not he would decide to restart his podcast. Because I think if he wanted to be a stand-up comedian, just do his podcast, I think he'd be fine. I think his Hollywood career is all but over. I don't think that's ever going to come back unless one of the girls retracts her statement and says she lied for clout or whatever. I don't think that's ever coming back. That is what it is. But if he wants to be a successful stand-up, touring the country and the world and doing his podcast, he could easily do that. I think if he just restarted it again today and just kind of address the situation. But working back in Hollywood, probably not going to happen. I don't think an interview Trisha Paytas is a good idea, to be honest, as your first interview back. But hey, it could be a start. But again, let me know your thoughts and opinions. What do you think? Do you agree with Trisha Paytas? Everyone abandoned him. Do you understand why everyone abandoned him? Did you expect more from Ethan Klein regarding the situation? And are you waiting with bated breath for Crystalia's return via the podcast? Let me know in the comments down below.